We've seen it, haven't we, Alex? That at American public libraries and in public schools, we're inviting transvestites to come to read to our kindergartners who actually have records, twice it happened in Houston, for having molested kids in the past.
This was the inevitable result of this, right? And now in California's fake history textbooks, they're praising this LGBT superhero, Harvey Milk, for being, the first elected openly homosexual activist. Turns out that guy also had a history of raping underage boys, and it is rape, right? The children cannot consent. And some of them went on to kill themselves, and yet they've made him into a superhero in California's textbooks as part of this new law that mandates the positive presentation of homosexuals and their alleged contributions to history.
All right, well, we might as well start from the top. Transvestite child molesters are reading books to your children. Pretty scary image, right? It shouldn't be, at least from my perspective, but it's obvious that Newman is playing to this fear within his audience. And according to him, the left wing is hopelessly ignorant for allowing trans people to enter such a position involving children. I mean, look, 2 transgender predators were reading to children in Houston, Texas. You scared yet? Well, to me, this just looks like a cheap fear tactic. Because according to multiple studies, transvestites and homosexuals do not commit sexual child abuse any more often than cisgender heterosexuals. According to these studies, a few linked below, child molesters tend to be cisgender males, regardless of whether they're homosexual or heterosexual. And this isn't just me talking. The studies are waiting in the description for you, readily available so you can fact check me. And yet in this program, the Dr. Duke Show is saying, oh, here's 2 examples, and that's enough for our audience, right? If I was a scientist, and I tried to build a study based on only 2 test subjects, my study wouldn't be given the time of day by a single professional in the scientific community. This is because 2 people do not paint a complete picture of the overall population. One of the studies linked below had a sample group of over 150 convicted sex offenders. Another source, concerning over 200 municipalities, ones that allowed transgender citizens to access their preferred restrooms, found that there was no increase in sex abuse crimes resulting from this policy change. Now, are some child predators transgender? Are some of them homosexual? Of course. But from what studies have shown, cisgendered males are more likely to commit these crimes, and as a result should be under far more scrutiny than any other group. Or in my opinion, there should be an even, consistent level of scrutiny for everyone. Keeping transsexuals away from your children will not protect them from child abuse, especially when child abuse tends to take place with someone close to the family, someone you know personally, not the person reading your kids a book at the library. Now, I love that Alex Newman called Harvey Milk's achievements for the gay community a part of the left wing's fake history textbooks, when information regarding his work is readily available and well documented. The beginnings of his relationship with Jack McKinley, 16 years old when they started seeing each other, is also well documented. They were together for about 16 years, McKinley tragically taking his life at the age of 33. Now, what Harvey Milk did should be considered an act of sexual abuse, especially since legally, New York State in 1963, which is where and when they met, held and still holds the age of consent at 17 years of age. The fact these 2 men had a decade-and-a-half-long formal relationship does give me the impression that there was more to their relationship than just sex. But it does not excuse that Milk interacted with a minor in this way to begin with, whether or not they had a serious relationship in the following years. Whether or not they loved each other, dating a 16-year-old was both a legal and a moral transgression, in my opinion. Whether or not Milk was a predator, though, it does not discount his work as a political figure. His achievement should not be ignored just because of his flawed character. I mean, we still teach about Andrew Jackson's presidential career. You know, the president who ignored the Supreme Court and allowed the Cherokee to be kicked off their reservation, beginning a death march today known as the Trail of Tears, which resulted in the death of about 4,000, 5,000 people. Or how about Thomas Jefferson, one of our founding fathers, who, according to plenty of evidence, slept with one or more of his slaves? And I mean, slaves can totally consent to sexual intercourse with their masters, right? Not that it mattered to the American government at the time, of course, since the majority of slaves did not have access to even the most minimal of legal rights or protections. Yet we still teach the importance of both these presidents in the classroom, while of course ignoring or making excuses for the horrible things they did. In my opinion, all three of these figures have a place in the classroom, but their achievements and failures should be shared, not hidden or over-exaggerated. History should be honest and critical. We should not ignore the parts of our history we hate and indulge in the fantasies we want. History is not fantasy. It's the retelling of our family's stories and how civilization came to this present point. The more we lie to ourselves, the more we create a false narrative that only creates more ignorance, when what we should be working towards is factual understanding of where we came from and why.
What they're going to have to do if they continue this, if this goes unchallenged, is they're going to have to teach children that to oppose the sexual advances of adults simply because they're adults is now a kind of bigotry and orientation phobia. That's the next logical thing, to convince kids that if they're not considering sex with older people, then they're being bigots. That's the only place we by definition have to go next.
The only place, by definition, we have to go next. At this point, I've rambled on enough for you, so I'll keep it brief. We've already talked about how the left wing and the homosexuals and the transgendered persons do not collectively want to sodomize your children. As the studies show, child sex abuse is tied to cisgendered males more so than homosexuality, heterosexuality, or transgenderism. There is no logical inclusion of pedophilia into the Equality Act, even if pedophilia is scientifically labeled a sexual orientation. The majority of people, regardless of whether they're homosexual or not, believe that child abuse is wrong. To say that the left wing wants to include pedophilia into the Equality Act because it's a sexual orientation, and then going so far as to calling this the next logical step? To who is that a logical train of thought, Duke Pesta? Who, specifically, thinks that makes sense? Besides you and Alex Newman and your producing staff, I'll assume. Sounds like you're just making up stuff just to get people riled up. And look at me. It worked. I'm riled up, except not for the reasons you intended. I hope more people don't take your story at face value, because in doing so, they fall victim to turning the left wing and the LGBTQ plus community into a scapegoat, so people like Duke Pesta can keep on ignoring the real problem, which is revealed by science and social study, more so than giving one or two examples and speaking in an inflammatory manner. Anyways, I'm tired. I hope you all have a great week. Stay safe. And, during this pandemic, wear your protection, wear a mask, wear gloves. I know they're saying masks aren't effectual or they could be harmful, but this virus is airborne. And if you care to protect your mouth, it's going to go a long way, even if it's not, perfect 100% protection. Hopefully I'll have a video ready for you by early next month. We'll see, I hope. It's going to be a lot longer than this one. But I just, I'm trying to stay hard at work and maintain this goal of mine to keep giving you another side of all of these conversations. And hopefully it matters to someone, anyone. Anyways, have a good one. Take care. This has been What's Missing.